The morning I was fined $500 for fishing was the same morning my grandson asked if his grandfather was watching him from the sky. I don't know which hurt more. The air was cool but gentle, the kind of morning that arrives like a soft apology after a restless night. The lake at Lakeshore Greens stretched out before us, still and silver, like a mirror too calm to lie. Birds moved between branches without urgency. Somewhere in the distance, a lawn sprinkler clicked to life. May knelt near the dock, rolling up the sleeves of her white cotton shirt, her knees pressing into the wood planks. Beside her, her grandson clutched a small fishing rod with both hands, eyebrows furrowed in careful concentration. "Don't tug too fast," she whispered. "Let it settle. Fish don't like to be rushed. They're a lot like people." He nodded seriously. The line drifted outward, catching a thin patch of sun where the reeds swayed near the shoreline. He glanced at her. "Do you think Grandpa can see us?" May looked at the water. For a moment, she didn't answer. She didn't need to. "I think," she said slowly, "he wouldn't miss this for anything." He smiled, proud and shy at once. The bobber floated, patient and bright. For the first time in weeks, his shoulders had loosened. Grief didn't vanish, but it paused, just long enough to breathe. Then came the voice. Sharp, tight, carved clean from condescension. "Excuse me. Just what do you think you're doing?" May turned. A woman in designer workout gear stood 10 feet away, holding a leather tablet and wearing an expression like she had caught them spray painting the community center. Her hair was perfectly waved, her nails lacquered in pale pink, her badge clipped neatly to the seam of her jacket. May stood, placing a gentle hand on her grandson's shoulder. "Good morning," she said calmly. "We're just fishing." "You're in violation of Lakeshore Greens community policy," the woman said crisply. "Fishing is strictly prohibited. You'll be fined $500. May blinked. There was no sign. No email. "A regulation update was sent out last month," the woman replied, tapping her tablet. "Perhaps you should check your spam folder. Ignorance doesn't excuse non-compliance." She didn't smile. She didn't need to. "I'm Sylvia Greaves, Director of Community Standards. And this lake is not a public park." May said nothing. Her grandson's grip tightened on the rod. "But it's just water," he said quietly. "We didn't hurt it." Sylvia didn't respond. May exhaled slowly. The edge of the rod trembled. "We'll pack up," she said. Her voice was level. Not bitter. Not broken. Just quiet. Sylvia nodded, satisfied, already turning away. Her heels clicked neatly against the path. As May reeled in the line, her grandson looked up at her, eyes wet, voice small. "At school, Brianna said you're the reason her mom can't sell their house. She said people like you make the neighborhood worse." May froze. He looked down. "She said, you're just some old lady who thinks she's important." May placed a hand on his back, steadying him like she had steadied the rod moments earlier. She didn't answer right away. Some truths are too heavy to carry with words. She gathered the tackle box, coiled the line, and handed the rod gently to him. "Let's go home," she said. They walked in silence, the dock creaking beneath their feet. Behind them, the water lay still, undisturbed again, but not peaceful. That night, after her grandson had gone to bed, May sat by the window and stared at the lake through the glass. It looked so quiet, so harmless. But she knew better now. Some lakes don't reflect. They absorb. She reached for her laptop and began to type. Not an email. A search. The woman stood with arms crossed, a clipboard in one hand and a branded badge clipped to her cardigan. Her posture alone announced authority, but it was the tone, dry, efficient, utterly unconcerned, that signaled this wasn't just about a fishing pole. She didn't ask. She told. This lake is under the jurisdiction of Lakeshore Greens Development Company. Recreational fishing has been prohibited as of last month's environmental review. You're in violation. May said nothing at first. Her grandson stared up at the woman, confused and embarrassed, clutching the small tackle box like it might protect him. May reached down, reeled in the line slowly, and stood. "I wasn't aware of any policy changes," she said, voice steady. We didn't receive notice. There was an email sent to all residents, the woman replied. Perhaps you should check your spam folder. Then, with a half smile that didn't touch her eyes, the fine is $500. You'll receive formal notice by mail. 2 days later, May stood at the edge of her porch, coffee in hand, watching from a quiet distance as laughter spilled across the lakefront. A tent had been set up near the water. Music played from hidden speakers. Women in linen pants and gold sandals sipped white wine in plastic goblets. Children ran barefoot near the same dock where May had been fined for disrupting the atmosphere. At the center of the gathering stood the same woman. Now in a powder blue wrap dress, she posed for photos beside a banner that read Lakeshore Legacy Summer Series. She raised a glass, gave a little wave, then turned to greet someone new with the same precision she had used to issue May's violation. Her name, May soon learned, was Sylvia Greaves. Sylvia wasn't just a community manager. She was the CEO of Lakeshore Greens Development Company, the firm that had built the neighborhood and now maintained near total control of its operation. That included property services, landscaping, infrastructure maintenance, and most notably, the Internal Regulations Committee. While not technically an HOA, the private development corporation operated in nearly identical fashion. But with one crucial difference: no oversight. Sylvia sat at the top of it all. The development's sleek, curated image wasn't an accident. It was policy. Every tree was pre-approved. Every fence height, porch light color, even mailbox finish was documented in a 72-page handbook that most residents never bothered to read until they received their first violation. But May did read it. And she noticed something else. The handbook she received when she moved in, printed, bound, sealed, contained no mention of fishing restrictions. But an updated version appeared on the neighborhood portal a few days after the incident by the lake, time-stamped to suggest it had been posted weeks before. When May asked another neighbor if they'd seen it, the woman hesitated. "We're part of the founding block," she said quietly. "Our emails go through a different list. Sylvia prefers to filter certain updates depending on who they affect." May looked at her. "What does that mean?" The woman shifted her weight. "I'd just be careful. You're new. And not everyone appreciates change." May said nothing. She didn't need to. The next morning, walking past the community pool, she heard whispers from 2 younger women in workout gear. "She still lives here. I thought she'd be too embarrassed to show her face. I heard she used to be a model or something. Must be hard fading out like that." May didn't turn. She just kept walking. That afternoon, she watched Sylvia host another lakefront event, this time a private cocktail hour for what appeared to be business partners. A temporary fence had been set up, sectioning off the western edge of the lake. Guests entered through a white archway with Sylvia's logo displayed in gold lettering. The same edge of water where May's grandson had cried quietly while holding a hook he never got to cast. The contrast burned. At home, May opened her laptop and began reading through property maps, corporate filings, development contracts, anything she could find that might explain how a public-facing amenity could be so selectively restricted. She found out more than she expected. Sylvia's company didn't own the lake. They leased it. May closed the tab, leaned back in her chair, and looked out the window toward the water. The same dock. The same curve of reeds near the shore. Only now she saw it differently. Not as a place for healing, but as a stage. And she had just met the woman who thought she owned the script. The comment came casually, tossed like a pebble into a deep lake, but the ripple it left was unmistakable. She must have been someone once. I mean, you can tell she carries herself like she used to matter. May heard it as she passed the rose bushes outside the clubhouse, spoken by a young woman in oversized sunglasses and flawless posture. The other laughed politely, sipping her green juice, eyes following May for just a second too long. She didn't pause. She didn't flinch. She just walked on. But the words stayed with her. Used to matter. The phrase peeled back something that had been carefully layered over the years, layered with time, with grace, with the quiet survival of someone who never had the luxury to stop. And it brought her, without asking, back to a memory that lived just beneath the surface of her composed exterior. There was a time when she didn't have a front porch to retreat to. No lake view. No mortgage. No peace. She remembered holding the hands of 3 children in the dead of winter, their breath visible in the cold Toronto air, all of them wrapped in the same thin coats they had brought from South Africa. She had left everything behind: family, friends, a marriage that had nearly broken her spirit, to start over in a country where no one knew her name. Not yet. The apartment was small. 1 bedroom, thin walls, no furniture beyond what they could find on the curb. They slept on blankets on the floor. She worked 5 jobs, teaching nutrition classes, modeling for local catalogs, answering phones at a clinic, taking evening clients for dietary consultations, delivering lectures when she could. There were nights she walked home because she couldn't afford the subway fare. She remembered the shame of standing outside a pharmacy while Elon counted change from a plastic bag, trying to buy cough syrup for his little brother. The clerk had watched like they were stealing something. May had smiled through it. She always smiled through it. She had been a model since she was 15, a finalist in Miss South Africa when she was barely out of school. But her mind had always been sharper than the flash of cameras. She earned 2 master's degrees, 1 in dietetics, 1 in nutritional science. She built a career brick by brick, not for fame, but for survival. For her children. People saw the silver hair, the elegant walk, the quiet dignity, and thought it came from comfort. They didn't know it was earned. Decades later, after everything, after the book deals, the TED Talks, the Vogue covers, the nutrition clients in 3 countries, she found herself standing beside a lake being told she didn't belong. Not again, she had thought. Not this time. Later that week, at a scheduled community meeting about upcoming landscaping projects, May sat near the back of the multipurpose room. Sylvia stood at the front, laser pointer in hand, outlining proposed changes to the Eastern Parkway. Her tone was practiced, pleasant, polished. It wasn't until a small shuffle of whispers passed through the rows that the atmosphere shifted. A man in a tan windbreaker, easily in his late 70s, leaned toward a woman beside him and said under his breath, though not low enough, "Do they even know who she is?" The woman turned, confused. "That's Maye Musk," he whispered. Sylvia kept speaking, but the rhythm faltered. Her assistant, a tall brunette in a navy sheath dress, leaned in and murmured something. Sylvia's gaze flickered toward the back row. Her mouth pressed into a line. She recovered quickly, of course. She always did. But the seed had been planted. May met her eyes briefly. Not with challenge. Not with anger. Just stillness. A kind of calm that only comes from someone who has walked through fire and come out with her integrity intact. The room didn't know the whole story. They didn't need to. But from that moment forward, the narrative shifted. She wasn't just a woman with silver hair and a fishing pole. She was Maye Musk. And she was not going anywhere. The plan didn't begin with vengeance. It began with a question. Who really owns the lake? May had learned long ago that authority often wears borrowed robes. People speak with certainty not because they are right, but because no one ever thinks to ask. So she asked. Quietly, precisely, and to the right people. Her first meeting was with a real estate attorney named Harris Lynn. He operated out of a modest office above a bookstore downtown, the kind of place most developers overlooked because it didn't come with valet parking or abstract art on the walls. But Harris had been doing land title work for 30 years, and he knew how to find the seams in polished narratives. He read over the documents May brought with her. Community bylaws. Property line diagrams. Easement clauses buried in the welcome packet. This lake, he said finally, tapping the 3rd page of a purchase agreement from 12 years ago, is not actually owned by Lakeshore Greens. It's leased. May leaned forward. From whom? Landbridge Development. Original developers. Looks like their lease with Sylvia's company expires at the end of next quarter. And Landbridge? Harris hesitated. Facing bankruptcy. They've liquidated most of their suburban holdings already. This lake is probably one of their last assets that isn't tied up in debt. May thanked him and left the office with more than answers. She had a crack in the armor. By the end of the week, she'd spoken with a local ecologist, Dr. Anika Flores, who had been quietly let go from a summer education program at the Lakeshore Greens clubhouse. Her sin had been encouraging children to collect water samples and observe fish behavior, an activity Sylvia had deemed disruptive. She said it made the lake look messy, Anika explained, shaking her head. Like curiosity was clutter. May invited her to coffee. Within 10 minutes, Anika agreed to help. They were joined later by a man named Gregory Vale, retired, sharp-eyed, and dry-humored. He had once been vice president at Landbridge before its slow descent. Now he spent his days tending to orchids and reading municipal code like fiction. Sylvia thinks she has this wrapped up, he said, sipping tea from a chipped mug. She's been negotiating behind closed doors to acquire the lake for preservation purposes. Preservation, May repeated. Gregory smiled. Meaning, restricted shoreline, private access, development of high-value lots along the eastern ridge. 5 homes max, but priced for 7 figures. She nodded slowly. It's not illegal, he added, but it is misleading. Most residents think the lake is protected. They don't realize that protected just means hidden behind a gate. May sat with that. Then she moved. Over the next 2 weeks, she formed MKM Holdings LLC, a shell company registered quietly under a New Mexico address. Harris handled the filings. Anika began compiling environmental impact data, showing how years of lawn chemical runoff had already altered the lake's natural balance. Gregory connected her with a former colleague at Landbridge, who confirmed the lake was indeed up for sale, and that Sylvia was offering to buy it through a third-party affiliate to avoid scrutiny. May made a different offer. All cash. Closing in 7 days. No contingencies. She didn't announce anything. Didn't call a meeting. Didn't post on any message boards. She simply moved the pieces, one by one, like someone who had played this kind of game before. Not in real estate. In life. Because when you've had to rebuild a family from dust, fill a fridge on 5 part-time jobs, and walk to work in sub-zero weather just to make rent, you learn how to think 5 steps ahead of people who've never had to think beyond tomorrow's brunch. She wasn't rushing. She was waiting. For the right moment. And it was coming. The first post appeared on the neighborhood forum just past midnight. It wasn't signed, but everyone knew who had written it. A reflection, it called itself. A concerned note about the slow erosion of community values, about certain residents whose choices compromised the aesthetic integrity and financial future of Lakeshore Greens. No names were mentioned, but the implication was sharp as a pin. Within hours, comments flooded in. Anonymous agreement. Veiled praise for the original post's graceful courage. One user even asked if there should be a petition to tighten screening for new homeowners. May didn't respond. She just read. By the end of the week, 3 citations had arrived at her door. One for flowers she had planted years ago, now considered non-compliant with the seasonal landscape palette. One for a side fence that measured 2 inches shorter than regulation. And one for her awning, which had apparently faded into a tone labeled visual disharmony under subsection 4.3 of the design guide. She knew better than to assume coincidence. Her grandson came home quieter each day. He stopped asking to go to the lake. He lingered in his room longer, his sketchbooks untouched. It wasn't until Thursday that she noticed the change in how the other parents looked at her in the school parking lot. Quick nods, tight smiles, eyes that shifted away too fast. That night, she found a crumpled paper in the bottom of his backpack. A note written in a child's careful, uneven print. Brianna said her mom called you a troublemaker. She said your house is making our neighborhood worth less. She said I should stop talking to you at school. The last line wasn't finished. May sat on the edge of his bed, watching him sleep. He had pulled the covers over his head like a fortress. One small hand peeked out, fingers curled. She returned to the kitchen, poured tea, and opened her laptop. For the first time since arriving, she typed the words Home Value Lakeshore Greens Sell fast into a search bar. A real estate page loaded. She clicked through the steps. Square footage. Condition. View. Optional reason for selling. She paused there. Across from her, the window reflected the dark glass of the lake. It looked peaceful. It wasn't. Her eyes drifted to the refrigerator, where a single piece of paper clung under a magnet. It was a letter, written in blue ink and folded unevenly. Her grandson had left it there weeks ago. "Dear Grandpa, I saw a fish jump again today. I didn't catch it. But I think next time I will. I'm going to try again. I want to show Grandma how good I am now. I think you'd be proud. Love, your fisherman." She didn't move for a while. Then she closed the real estate tab. The next morning, she trimmed the roses by the fence, the ones now flagged as unauthorized flora. She used the clippings to fill a vase on her kitchen table. That afternoon, she painted the mailbox in the exact shade of white listed in the guidelines, then received a warning that it did not match the asterisk intended tone asterisk described in the handbook. When she tried to appeal, the reply was brief: "The board regrets to inform you your request has been denied due to administrative backlog." By week's end, her citations numbered 9. Some neighbors stopped looking away. A few offered small nods, hesitations in their step, like they wanted to say something but hadn't yet found the courage. Others avoided her entirely. And yet, one morning, taped to her front gate, she found a photograph. It showed her and her grandson at the lake, months ago. He was holding a tiny fish, laughing. She was kneeling beside him, her arm outstretched, steadying the rod. On the back of the photo, written in neat handwriting, were the words, "Keep going." Some of us still remember why this mattered. She read it twice. Then she pinned it beside the citations on her wall. Later that evening, as the sun melted into the trees and the lake settled into stillness again, her grandson curled beside her on the porch swing. "Grandma," he said softly, "are we going to leave?" She didn't answer right away. She looked out at the water. "No," she said finally. "We're not. Even if they keep being mean. Especially then." He was quiet a moment. "I want to catch one again. For Grandpa." "You will," she said. He smiled, eyes half closed. She watched the light dim around them, warm and gold and steady. Never teach a child that silence is safer than truth. Never teach them that dignity only belongs to the loud. Some lessons are worth more than comfort. Some lines must never be reeled in. The white tent gleamed like a sail in the wind, stretched taut over polished tables and catered buffet. Music floated over the lake, soft piano jazz from hidden speakers. Around the edges of the dock, waiters in black shirts served wine in tall glasses that caught the afternoon light. A large banner hung at the center of the gathering, printed in gold serif letters, "Lake Future Vision Elevating Community, Preserving Legacy." Sylvia Greaves stood beneath it, radiant in a cream silk blazer and diamond earrings that winked with every tilt of her head. She smiled as she greeted guests, many of whom had arrived in coordinated shades of beige and taupe. The invitation had read suggested formal, but everyone knew what that meant. No jeans. No clutter. No surprises. Until now. May stepped onto the dock quietly, wearing the same crisp white shirt she had worn the morning she was fined. Her slacks were simple, her shoes flat. No jewelry. No entourage. Just a worn leather folder under one arm and a calm that unnerved even the most practiced hosts. She walked slowly through the gathering, not looking for attention, but gathering it all the same. Conversations dimmed. Eyes turned. A few guests looked toward Sylvia, whose smile faltered for a half-second before snapping back into place. "Excuse me," May said, stepping up to the center of the tent. "I won't take much of your time." Sylvia's voice came tight and sweet. "This is a private event, Ms. Musk. Perhaps another day." "No," May replied gently, "today is fine." She set the folder on the nearest table and opened it. Inside were several documents, stamped and notarized. "As of this morning," she said, her voice steady but clear, "the lake and all surrounding 10 feet of shoreline have been purchased by MKM Holdings." A pause. "That company belongs to me." Silence spread like water spilled on stone. One man cleared his throat. Sylvia's assistant stepped forward quickly, voice sharp. "That property is under lease to Lakeshore Greens. You have no right to interrupt this gathering." May didn't look at her. She looked instead at the uniformed officer standing near the perimeter, one of two May had requested as neutral observers. She nodded once, and the officer stepped closer. "The lease in question expired this morning," May said. And the renewal clause, as stipulated by Landbridge Development's original contract, requires consent from the new owner. She looked at Sylvia then, not with malice, not with triumph, just with the kind of unwavering patience that makes people nervous. "I do not consent." Sylvia took a step forward, her composure beginning to slip. "This is absurd. You can't just buy a community lake and close it off." May lifted a document and held it toward her grandson, who had been standing quietly just beside the tent entrance. "Would you mind holding this for me?" she asked. "Justice shouldn't tremble." He took it with both hands, solemn and careful. Someone near the back gasped softly. The officer addressed the crowd now, his voice firm. "At this time, we must ask all non-authorized guests to step away from the shoreline. This is now private property under the jurisdiction of MKM Holdings. Any disputes can be filed through the appropriate civil channels." No one moved at first. Then a woman with silver-streaked hair and a floral scarf, someone May recognized as having once been reprimanded by Sylvia for setting up a birdhouse, stood. She clapped once. Then again. The sound was crisp, echoing oddly against the hush. Others followed. Not many at first. But enough. Sylvia's jaw tightened. "You're making a mistake," she said under her breath. "This won't stand." May didn't flinch. "I'm not here to win, Sylvia. I'm here to remind you that rules are not weapons." She turned to the guests. "For those wondering what happens next, it's simple. The lake will no longer be controlled by a private development company whose interests are not always aligned with those of the people who live here. What happens next is that this place returns to the community, not a curated version of it, but the real one." She nodded toward the dock. "The one where children once learned to fish without fear of a fine. The one where silence didn't mean control." No one interrupted her. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Sylvia stood motionless, her hands clasped tightly at her sides. The catered tables were still untouched. The music had stopped. And the lake, behind them all, shimmered in the late afternoon light, calm, open, waiting. May stepped down from the tent, took her grandson's hand, and walked the path back home as the first murmurs of change began to ripple across the crowd. The lake had always been beautiful. But now, it was something else. It was quiet, not in the way of silence, but in the way of healing, like breath returning after a long-held tension. The fences were gone. The event tents dismantled. The gold-lettered banners taken down and folded away. For the first time in years, the water belonged to no one and everyone all at once. 2 weeks after the announcement, a new sign was installed at the entrance to the lakeside path. The letters were carved cleanly into the wood, hand-painted in deep blue. Rachel's Peace Lake. No fanfare. No press. Just a name. Chosen not for headlines, but for memory. Rachel had loved still places. She used to call them quiet mirrors. In the early years, when Elon was small, she would bring him to the edge of any water they could find, a creek, a pond, a puddle deep enough to reflect the sky, and tell him stories about the world's secrets being stored underwater. He believed her. So did May. Now the lake held its new name like a secret finally spoken aloud. Word spread fast. The following Saturday, families began arriving. Not the curated kind with guest lists and dress codes, but the real kind. Strollers and folding chairs. Thermoses of lemonade. Fishing rods patched with tape. Laughter that didn't ask for permission. May watched from the edge of the dock, the same dock where this had all begun. Her grandson stood beside her, holding a clipboard with a sign-up sheet labeled Junior Conservation Club. The program was simple. Weekly gatherings for local children to learn about ecosystems, lake preservation, and wildlife observation. No cost. No prerequisites. Just curiosity. There was one condition. Children of the former development board, those still holding positions of administrative power, were not eligible to participate until their parents stepped down. It wasn't punishment. It was principle. On the third week, Veronica Langley approached May after the session. She wore a polite smile and a linen blazer the color of driftwood. "My daughter loves biology," she said, smoothing her blouse. "She's been talking about your program non-stop. I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but I was wondering if an exception might be possible." Maye looked at her. "I'm glad she's interested," she said calmly. "But the policy stands. Once you're no longer on the board, we'd be happy to have her." Veronica opened her mouth as if to argue, then stopped. Something passed through her expression. Understanding, maybe. Or something quieter. She nodded. "I see." 2 weeks later, she submitted her resignation. Others followed. By the end of the month, 5 board members had stepped down. The company that had once dictated the color of mailboxes no longer controlled the shorelines. The enforcement arm of Lakeshore Greens had been reduced to basic maintenance contracts. And Sylvia Greaves, after issuing a statement about re-evaluating future priorities, stepped down in full. Her home was listed for sale the following week. No one seemed in a hurry to buy it. At a community meeting soon after, someone whispered, "She didn't need to shout. She just read the fine print better than anyone else." Another neighbor added quietly, "She didn't win with fists. She won with facts." Maye declined to join the new advisory committee. She had no interest in managing, only in protecting. That protection took shape in small ways. Free workshops on native plants. Bird-watching mornings for children. A restored walking trail where residents could listen to water instead of regulations. The lake began to breathe again. The fish returned to the shallows. The algae cleared. Ducks nested by the reeds without disruption. And children laughed again, not in hushed tones but openly, without fear of being told they were too loud. One evening, as the last light bent over the water, Maye sat on the dock with her grandson. The air was cool, and the lake mirrored the sky in soft streaks of rose and blue. He held a fishing rod in his lap, though neither of them expected a catch. It wasn't about fish anymore. It was about memory. About presence. He looked up at her, his voice just above a whisper. "Do you think Grandpa sees us?" Maye rested her hand lightly on his shoulder, eyes fixed on the still water. "I think," she said, "he never looked away." He leaned into her side. The sun dipped lower. A ripple passed across the lake's surface, then faded. Behind them, the community settled into the kind of peace that does not come from control, but from care. From choosing stillness over spectacle. From remembering that dignity, once claimed, can never be taken, only honored. And at Rachel's Peace Lake, it would be. Always.